Left off from part one, cutting these 45s off the angle. It's just 2 blocks of wood screwed together with a piece of stainless steel screening, just a strand of it that I pull out, wrap it up around a couple screws and then blocks. Makes a great 45 tool, doesn't break very easily. Stoneware gives some resistance, so it breaks after a while, but if you use an ungrogged porcelain or something like that, it'll last forever. Get all these flips so we could score up the bottoms. Again, be careful that you're lifting it even, although it is pretty stiff by this point anyway. This scoring tool is excellent. It really beats anything out there. We're going to do one stroke straight across and then give it a bit more of an angle and run it again. Straight and then a little angle to give you a little more coverage. Make sure that there's no flat parts under there. Make sure that it's all torn up. This is when it could get a little messy. It's nice to have it a little wet at this point, but I'll show you how to clean it easy in a minute. Because that angle ain't too great, this is an upstroke. It's a lot more comfortable. It's hard to get a downstroke to work on this, so you want to upstroke it. Now this is important. Your last stroke has to be the length, and we'll get into more of that later. But you always want that last stroke to run the length of it. It has to do with moisture and keeping that water even. I'll show you that in a few. Same thing here. One stroke and then a little bit different angle to get full coverage. One stroke across and another one a different angle to get more coverage. All the way around the horn. And now here, because it's a 45, you could do a downstroke and then a finish stroke across the length. Downstroke, 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 finish stroke across the length. Downstroke, 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 downstroke. Finish across the length till you're done all the way around. This we're going to line up just with the prongs of the scoring tool itself. Just about 3 prongs, line it up. Same thing, we're going to run one straight, angle it a bit to get more coverage and run it again. Then this is a pull stroke from the ruler to the outside. And we're not really just scoring here. We're kind of creating a little groove for that wall to sit in. What we're doing here when we're scoring like this, people say you're making like a Velcro pattern. It's not Velcro. Basically, after we compressed it, like in the last video, we aligned all those clay particles, right? So all these clay particles are aligned in a fashion that they're kind of going to repel each other if you stick them, right? So you're basically just undoing that compression so those clay particles are free flowing again. Then when you add that water, stick them together, they kind of come back and meld better together because of their configuration. It's not about having it look like Velcro or not. That's not the way that it works. The actual way that it works is just disrupting the configuration of the clay particles. So when you stick it together, they could come back together. And then when we press it down and compress those walls down, it's going to flatten everything out and bring everything back tight. It's like the memory thing. Like, sure, Velcro's a good idea, but to know what's actually happening, I think works a lot better. All these, again, make sure you're running that long stroke in the end so that water could run. And we're going to get to that part in a second. I like to use a plastic ruler here because it's not going to dull out your scoring tool as fast. So even if well, actually I almost always use this ruler for this, but if you got a metal ruler out, don't use it. Grab the plastic one. Keep your tool lasting longer. Now normally here I'll just grab the board and stretch over, but for the purpose of showing you, this is a real easy way to get that all cleaned off. Just blow it off, stick it in your bin, and it falls into there. Sometimes you blow it in your eye, but if you're careful, you won't. I should actually put that down onto the thing and off the turntable now, but it's up in the air, and you're going to be able to see this a little better. But this is where we're dropping water down that channel, so it runs down and you don't get more water built up in one area. See, this way the water flows smoothly across your whole thing, and you don't have to worry about dropping exact amounts on each piece because it's flowing freely. That's the purpose of that long stroke every time in the end. Line this up, compress it down good. It's important that you get the back started and roll it towards you like this, so that slip comes and pushes out to the inside, so you have some material to work with there to button it up later. That's going to be the third part where we do the finishing of the inside. But it's important to get that back lined up and pull it into you and press it so it squeezes out the face there. You need that material to tighten it up later. You could hear and feel air bubbles coming out of that. It's not just visual. You could hear the bubbles popping. You could feel the air coming out. So definitely use all your senses to make sure that is good and solid. You may have noticed the pot switch. This one's a little bigger. Same spot in the sequence though. Making sure it's all down. Usually the ends, because when it's drying, it's going to kind of curl up a little on the end, so they kind of have a little, you got to press them sides down in the corner a little harder than the middle. Turn around, doing it again. I do the long sides first because that's going to be the visual. Here we go. Oh, hear this? It's about 1 drop of water per inch, roughly. It's going to give or take a few, but about 1 drop of water per inch is what's going to allow you enough water and not too much. Same thing, that channel is going to let it flow, so you don't have to worry about creating a dam where all the water just sits in one spot. Makes it a lot easier. Same thing, roll it into yourself, let that slip ooze out the face, so you got that to work with on the inside of the pot. That channel trick, even if you lose, or even if you use slip, that channel, that last channel, is going to be important, because even though it's not water, just that moisture is going to follow that channel a lot better too. So even if you do use slip, which is a waste of time and energy and effort, it's still good to make that last long stroke. Flippy turn, turny flip, drip per inch. Usually you could have 1 or 2, fall up the piece like that, and it's not going to bother it too much. If it's porcelain, I'll make sure it doesn't do it a little more. But even then, it really doesn't matter if you're kind of even. Here, always start at the top of these on the sides, and then that water is going to actually drip down and across the first 1/2 inch to inch of that bottom. That way it's already fully wet from the top of that and down to that inch, and then you're only dripping maybe 2, 3, 4 drips on the middle part of that bottom wall. Whereas if you do the whole bottom wall first, it's super wet, and then you go up and do the top, and then it drips down and it just ends up too wet at the bottom there. So always do the top of the walls first, let that water flow down and tell you where you have to continue putting water. That way you don't get it too wet. It's real important here to get where all 3 pieces are coming together really solid. And I'll run a downstroke. It's important that the thumbs on the inside there are really holding that clay down, so you're not moving it. And then using that inside part of both index fingers to compress it, and then do this downstroke to kind of, again, you'll hear the bubbles pop out. You'll see that slip. Same thing on this. You want to get that outside part first and squeeze that slip onto the inside, so you have that material to work with when we're going to finish the inside. Oh, I think I passed at this one. I cracked that wall. Cracked that wall right there. But we're gonna come back and fix that little bonus content right there. Is where it cracked as I push it down. A little too dry. This is the first time that ever happened to me. but we're gonna fix it. All the work here is gonna vary how much toying with it you gotta do, depending on how well it goes together, where everything ships out to. Sometimes see that bottom little piece hanging out, sometimes you grab that off the bottom and throw it on the inside if you're lacking material in there to work with to seal up that. Again, that's going to be in part 3. But those little bits can be tossed to the inside where you're lacking slip push through. Here we're going to grab the rib tool and we're holding the side wall, compressing these corners in. Compress. You could do like a downstroke on some sides to get everything like in order, but usually just doing this back and forth a little bit will get everything aligned into where it needs to be, nice and even. You kind of got to push at the bottom of the corner a little heavier, just again to make sure that you got where they're all three coming together really solid. A little extra handy work. I have to find a better camera angle to do that inside work. I think we'll be able to figure it out though. Same thing on these all the way around. Oh, this is important that you do the side that you did first, because it's not really going to have equalized yet. There's a point later where we're finishing the outside where the water pretty much migrated around and everything is pretty much even in moisture, so it doesn't really matter. This is a stick tool one. This is the spoon side of it. Use the spoon side to do the corners because there's a little indent from where you're squeezing with your fingers. So that kind of keeps everything smoother, using the spoon side on the corner sides. Then we're going to flip it around and use the straight part to go all the way across. Now, what we talked about before as far as cutting the angle when we cut the walls off, and that angle and how important that is. Sometimes you'll see here you got a bit of a gap on the outside. So sometimes you're going to come up and do a downstroke to really compress that clay back down again. Sometimes you could just go up like I'm doing now because it fit really well. Sometimes you'll grab some of that excess, jam it into the, like if there's a little bit of gap, you'll jam it into the gap a little better. This one was rather even. Upstroke. See, I had a little bit of hole there, just jam some clay in there. And this tends to be enough to button up this outside and not really have problems in the future after firing and whatnot. All cleaned up. Probably flip right back around to the spoon and clean up them corners a little bit better. Trying to get through this without doing all four because it's kind of boring. There's the spot that I cracked when I was pushing down on that edge last time. Cracked about a 1/4 inch down. Never had it happen before. Of course it's going to happen when I'm trying to make a nice video. But we're going to fix that anyway. This clay is easy to do like this. Just score it off a little. Get a little piece of scrap and throw it on there. And I'm not really worried about making it smooth back out. It's just a feature now. This will probably get glazed anyway. Dot that up with a little water from the bucket. Jam it on there and smooth it out. This is going to have to be looked at after it comes out the fire and make sure that everything's alright. But usually with this clay, this little quick fix will work fine. A little texture on the outside. What's that texture for? Fixing mistakes. I think that's going to be about it. Sometimes, well, I guess we'll probably get into that later, but you could run a rib across the top lip where we ran that round blue thing. Run it kind of tighten that back up. Your little 45s on the edges, tighten that back up with a wooden rib. We'll probably do that in the next video. A little more water there to get that to mesh in well. And I think that's about it. The most important thing is not using slip because it's a waste of time, and making that final stroke the length of it so your water runs and you don't create a dam situation where you get water built up, because then everything's uneven, and we don't like uneven. We do like drinking tequila today. And that's about it. Hit me with questions or whatever if you want to see anything else. I'm about to do a kiln opening video tomorrow. That should be pretty interesting because it's going to be my first one. Because it's probably the first kiln that I could definitely trust to come out after a couple excellent ones. It's just a little extra. Finishing up that other side. I think this one actually gave me a little problems where I had to do some downstrokes on it. But that's about it. This one's probably not going to be as educational. It's kind of lame.